We're starting with Ukraine again.
We are indeed. There is a glimmer of hope this morning that a new deal could calm the violent clashes in Ukraine. 3 days of fighting killed more than 100 people in Kiev. The country's president says this morning he agreed to loosen his grip on power.
Here is a look at the scene in Independence Square this morning. Negotiators met all night to work out an agreement. It is still unclear if opposition groups will go along. Holly Williams is in Kiev, where word of a deal is not stopping the protests this morning. Holly, good morning to you.
Good morning, Charlie and Nora. Ukraine's President Viktor Yanukovych has agreed to hold elections later this year and to form an interim coalition government. But that is not enough for his opponents. There were scuffles this morning in Ukraine's parliament as opposition members called for snap presidential elections. And the protesters here in Kiev's Independence Square say they will stay put until the president is removed from power. In yesterday's deadly clashes, dozens of policemen were captured by protesters.
Where are you taking them? Where are you taking them?
Negotiators secured their release, but last night a mob of angry demonstrators tried to stop them from being handed over. This woman said she wanted the policemen to be held hostage until protesters arrested by the authorities are also released. After priests intervened, the policemen were eventually allowed to go free. The demonstrators are irate after the worst bloodshed since these protests began 3 months ago. In yesterday's chaotic fighting, police cut down the demonstrators with live ammunition, leaving city streets smeared with blood. Some of the protesters also fought with firearms. Others hurled rocks and Molotov cocktails. Many of the injured were dragged to a makeshift hospital in the lobby of a nearby hotel.
It's bullet wounds that they were killed with. To the head.
But at least 77 people couldn't be saved, and some here put the figure much higher.
These protests began peacefully back in November. The demonstrators accused Ukraine's leaders of being corrupt, increasingly dictatorial and too close to Russia.
But many Ukrainians now fear their country could be on the brink of civil war. The government is resolved to regain control, and the once peaceful protesters have become armed revolutionaries who have seen their comrades die and are more determined than ever to remove Ukraine's leaders from power. On Independence Square this morning, we've seen the demonstrators building new barricades. They are clearly expecting more violence. Charlie and Nora.
Thanks, Holly. The State Department is warning Americans against traveling to Ukraine. Secretary of State John Kerry says he feels anger and anguish after yesterday's deadly violence. Major Garrett is at the White House, where officials are considering stronger action against Ukraine's government. Major, good morning.
Well, good morning, Charlie and Nora. The White House is no doubt aware of this announcement of a preliminary deal to end the bloodshed in Ukraine, but it's withholding formal comment. The White House continues to threaten Ukraine with even tougher economic sanctions if the bloodshed continues. It wants to see just how enthusiastically this preliminary deal is embraced by the besieged government of President Viktor Yanukovych and the street protesters seeking his immediate ouster. Now, the violence has continued all week, even after the announcement of a truce on Wednesday. That accounts for part of the White House caution. But the difference now is bigger players are involved. There's a Russian envoy who's been negotiating with the Ukrainian government, and yesterday President Obama spoke by telephone with German Chancellor Angela Merkel. The European Union has been involved in these negotiations, and of course Germany plays a very large role within the European Union. Also yesterday, for the second time this week, Vice President Joe Biden spent more than an hour on the phone with Yanukovych, urging him to pull back all security forces, specifically snipers and paramilitary units most responsible for the violence in the streets. Now, this deal announced would bring opposition figures into a new unity government, calls for a referendum on the Constitution in September, and new presidential elections in December. Generally speaking, the White House has supported those kind of moves to resolve this crisis, but again, Charlie and Nora, it wants to wait to see just how enthusiastically both the opposition and the Yanukovych government are committed to this preliminary deal.
And that's why this is a crucial moment, Major. Thank you. And millions across the country are facing